Did you guys know that almost half a billion podcast listeners globally in just 2023 listen to podcasts? Did you also know that 62%, right, of US citizens have listened to a podcast? Did you also know that 79% of people in the US listen to a podcast from their smartphone? So this device right here, right? Did you also know that listeners of podcasts tend to be wealthier with an average income of $100,000 or more? And they also happen to have a college or university degree. So the importance of podcasts is, I mean, there's so many different reasons why you would want to, number one, possibly start a podcast, or number two, be a guest on a podcast. I've actually tried both of these things, right? I've had my own podcast. And I've been a guest on dozens and dozens and dozens of podcasts. And what we're going to talk about today is how to get interviewed on podcasts and gain instant fame, and how you can do that as a beginner, right? And I say how to get interviewed on podcasts and gain instant fame because it seemed like every time I was on someone else's podcast, I gained like this instant level of fame. Like their audience was transferred over to me. So the credibility that they had with their audience was instantly transferred over to me. Right. So does that make sense? So podcasts are something that are fantastic. And ever since we first had our guest on last week and we were talking about podcasts, I've just been asking myself like two questions. Number one, why the hell did I ever stop my podcast? Right? Like, why did I stop it? Because I had no reason to stop it. And number two, why did I stop actively seeking to be a guest on podcast shows of other people? I had no reason to stop, right? And in the internet marketing space, and maybe our guest has heard of this, sometimes we stop doing things just because they work so well, right? Just because they work so well and there's no rhyme or reason to it. So since we've had our guests come on the first time, I've seriously been thinking about both of these things. Both are going to be incorporated into my weekly practices. So I'm going to go back and I'll start recording podcast episodes again. I'm going to have some fun with this. I'm going to have a couple of different podcasts I think that I'm going to set up. I'm going to talk about one where this is a title that I was thinking about the other day, and it is how to just live a great life. Right? How to live a great life. I was just thinking about my life, and I live a really great life. And what I mean by that is I live a great life because I've got my health, number one. There was a time when I just didn't have my health and it was just terrible. I damn near died probably a dozen times. It's got great people that are part of my life, and you guys are part of that, right? Caroline, you're part of that. So very cool to have you. Nimish, you're part of that, and Marvin, we were talking about you and Rhoda and everyone else, Philip Reese. And I'm just happy, like I'm just in a good space right now. I'm just mentally in a good space. I'm physically in a good space. And so I'm gonna start a podcast that talks about how to have a great life, whatever that looks like for you. It's not gonna be business related, it might be business related, it's not gonna be family related, it might be family related. It's not gonna be health related, it might be health related. So it's just going to be all over the place with no rhyme or reason to it. And the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to actively start becoming a guest on other people's podcasts. And that's what we're going to talk about today. How do you do that? Because you might say, hey, Ty, well, look, I got nothing to talk about. Like, people don't want to hear from me. Why would someone say, look, I want to get Michelle Runge on my podcast, or I want to get Patricia on my podcast? And our guest today is going to kind of talk about that. I'll share some things that I've done as well. And before we jump into that, I want to know what Caroline has over there in her cup. What are you sipping? What type of tea do you got over there?
Tea. Normal tea.
Normal
like
tea.
English breakfast tea. Yeah, not anything herbal and healthy. Caffeine. Yeah, and it's interesting what you're saying about podcasts, because I've our very own Kat who's here on the call in our community. Hi, Kat, in our FastPass community.
Who has sent me a message, by the way, and Kat, I will get to your message. I am the worst when it comes to responding back to messages.
Me too. And me too. And we have got she's done an amazing checklist. Well, actually, it's turned into an ebook for us to share with the community as well, because Kat is a professional podcaster, and she has asked me about 3 times to go onto her podcast, and it's actually to do with things like, women, business, menopause, all those sorts of things that are really important.
I was just thinking, why the hell hasn't she asked me? But now it just makes sense.
Well, actually, she does have. I'm joking. And I've always been too busy, so it's just made me realize. And we were chatting yesterday during the Get It Done challenge as well. But after that, I was thinking I must come forward now, and there's no excuse. You're never going to have loads of time. You just got to do it. And I've done the same with Jeff. Asked me to do one, and various people. And I'm always just too busy. And I've got a really good quote, and it isn't about podcasts, but it sort of is about that space in terms of our marketing and advertising. And I thought, this is so me sometimes. And it is: a man who stops advertising to save money is like a man who stops a clock to save time. So you could say, a man who stops advertising to save time is like a man who stops a clock to save time. And that's Henry Ford. There you go. And I'll just quickly grab that while we were talking at the beginning. But yeah, I mean, your podcasts are great, Ty. When you do anything, it's always fabulous. Like all your YouTube videos, people love them.
Wow.
Because it helps you, it helps the community, the whole world, and also the person that you're interviewing, like you say, for their own social media presence, their own business. So it's a win-win on all fronts, isn't it? And it's great.
Yeah. Look, I think that the thing that I get, and thanks, I'll accept all of that 100%, right? I think the thing is to have fun with it. Like I've learned, because I used to try to be just so damn serious with everything and boring as heck. And I'm just like, look, I just want to have fun with life, right? You only get one of these things, right? You should just be. I found that you could have fun, you could still be serious, and you can find the folks that appreciate who you are, right? And you still serve and you still benefit from it, right? So whenever I do like our student interviews, like the one I did with you and the ones that, Gabby and just Michael Lopez, those things are fun. And now they've become fun. But initially, the anxiety of doing one, because I was just trying to be so professional, and it would keep me up all night, and I'm thinking about the perfect questions to ask. And then when I just said, you know what, I'm just going to do this thing and we're just going to have fun and it's going to be whatever it's going to be, then in my head, they started to get better. So I want to ask you a question. Pat's asking you to be on her podcast. Are you nervous? Is that the true reason why, or?
No.
Okay.
No. I'm not nervous about things like that anymore. I used to be a couple of years ago, like when we first met.
Yeah.
I was nervous about that interview that we did, and then a subsequent one we did. And I remember we both had a conversation about, we're just going to start this thing. But no, it's just because I just feel like I haven't got time. And so that's something, to address, because if you go on and talk about something about, then it's not like you're talking about hours of prep. You just got to go get it in the diary. And so I'm going to do that with Kat after this week, and then commit to me. She's probably got a schedule where she can't fit me in yet anyway, but I'm going to have a conversation with her and get that scheduled in, because there's no excuse really not to do it. But it's really interesting what you're saying about being serious and boring,
right?
Because one of my things that I decided in terms of leaving the old me behind when I came back from Dubai was that, oh my God, I'm so serious quite a lot of the time. And so
you think you're serious?
Yeah, I'm boring. So I just like I think a lot, analyze things. I'm quite serious. So I just thought, I'm just going to have way more fun and just be more lighthearted, because I noticed that, well, that's key, isn't it, to being happy, just to not take things too seriously. And I don't worry so much, but I can get quite serious. And so that's a great goal. If anyone feels like they're just too serious, we've got to lighten up. and have more fun, and not worry about things, and just go in and enjoy things. Because when you do podcasts or YouTube videos, or we do live events, often we don't have a lot of lead-in prep time, and it always goes really well. So it's actually, I think being serious is also about being more confident and trusting yourself.
Yes.
That,
which comes with time. What comes with repetition.
It comes with experience and time. Because when I do the FastPass training, I used to prep for ages, and I wouldn't do something unless I was completely prepped. And the last couple that I've done, which have been the best ones, have actually been where I've not overthought things. I just thought, okay, this is a good topic. We'll go in and we'll do this.
Yeah.
Half an hour, 45 minutes, and an hour prep, and then we're straight in. And it's gone really, really well, just because we had more fun, and so, and I think that, and then, because you realize when you're talking to great people, whether it's one-to-one or in a group, they've got so much to bring in. So it's sort of like you don't need to rely on yourself like we do, because it's the collective energy. And that's certainly the case with our FastPass team, because people, when we brainstorm on the calls, we all learn from each other. Loads of ideas come out. Like, oh my goodness, that's a good idea. I haven't tried that, Yeah.
And it becomes, as Napoleon Hill says, this universal mind, right? So you're masterminding. So instead of just the one individual, there's so much power that comes in when there's two or more minds put together, right? Collectively seeking the problem. I think the other thing is, look, when you come in and you do this stuff, and this is for you guys as you're building out your businesses, whatever business it may be, a digital business, a brick and mortar business, a Kindle publishing business, a coaching business. Like when you truly try to go in and make it an effort to help other people get what it is that they want, as Zig Ziglar used to say, you can get anything that you want, right? So if you truly go in and you're like, well, how can I serve people? What past experience do I have? What knowledge do I have? What errors have I made in my life, right? And we probably all made a ton of them. And how can I pass that on to other people so that they don't make the same mistakes? They don't make the same, we do that with our kids sometimes, right? And because we've made the mistakes in whatever area, so we want to pass them down. So I think if we take that same approach of passing down to our kids, but we take the same approach of passing down to our audience, our customers, our followers, whoever it may be, then I think we'll be in a good position. And
and I think it's sort of like coming from a place of contribution, isn't it? I think often when we stop doing things like that, like podcasts as an example, we do it because we're busy, or we're bored of it, or whatever, or we just think that even though it was working well, we're just going to do something else. And so I think if we come always from the space of contribution, all of us, we've all got so much information to contribute and experience on different topics, and you just don't realize how many people you can touch and affect. Just one guest, one time, saying one thing can change someone's life. So that's so powerful.
I think the biggest thing for anyone to get over is the belief that they don't have anything to share. And I want to bring our guest on.
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm going to kind of, look, Caroline and I, we get into these things. We just start. You guys are.
Oh my God, it's 9 a.m. Bye, guys.
Right. And then we just start going. All right. So our guest today, we're bringing the incredible, amazing Vernon Foster II back. Guys got the second in his name, as I kind of teased him about last week, which I think is just so cool. It's like a James Bond type of a thing there. Vernon Foster II. So his entrepreneurial journey began at 19 when he launched his first business, an entertainment company, while attending Florida State University. However, it was in 2013 that he discovered his true passion for podcasting. In 2014, he founded PodParrot, a done-for-you podcast agency to help business owners find their voice. Since then, Vernon has worked behind the scenes on hundreds of successful podcast launches, elevated the talent roster of the third largest global podcast startup, Acast, and personally hosted 5 podcasts. So today he assists innovative business owners in leveraging the power of audio and video. His most recent venture, webinarspokesperson.com, which I think is an amazing idea, delivers profitable webinars without the need to use your face, voice, or personal brand. So Vernon's work has been featured on entrepreneur.com, EO Fire, and podcast movement. And as I shared at the beginning, some of these numbers when it comes to podcasting are like insane, right? Almost 500 million podcast listeners globally as of 2023. 62% of US citizens have listened to a podcast at some time. 79% of people in the US listen to a podcast from their smartphones. And this is just from the US, right? So think about all of the other countries out there. And listeners tend to have a high income, so $100,000 or more annually, and have a college or university degree. So with that said, Vernon, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself, my guy. I'm going to bring you on. There he goes. He's back. Look, this is a true podcast setup. I've got my little speaker thing over here, but I never use it. So I put it up there. I spent an hour putting this down thing up there about 2 years ago and never used it. So you reminded me to use it here. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, Ty. Welcome. Thanks for welcoming me and having me back. And good to see all the familiar faces that were here last week. I appreciate you guys having me. It's good. This is going to be exciting.
Absolutely. You got a glow going on, man. You and Caroline have a great glow going on this morning.
Thank you.
I'm always looking at my guest. Marvin's shaking his head, so he's kind of agreeing with me. So I'm always looking at my guests, and I'm like, how are they getting these amazing glows? And I want to be around people that have that glow, because that means that you got the good energy.
For sure.
So podcasting, being a guest on a podcast, like, what are your thoughts about it, man? I talked about how, for me, it just worked, and then I just stopped working it.
Yeah, that's pretty common. I mean, it's I think being a guest on podcasts is it's an easier lift than starting. I know we talked about last week about starting your own show. But I think for most people that are getting in the game, I always try to find like the shortest path to success.
Yep.
And people already have podcasts, right? And they need guests. We'll talk about this later, but I think that's easier for most people, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So someone's wondering right now, maybe we'll say they have a book, right? Or they're working on the book.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be beneficial for them to be a guest on a podcast? And from my own experience, right? Look, I've been the guest on a podcast where we talked about a topic that I was knowledgeable about, that I had some interest in. And then at the end of that, right, the host would often ask me, hey, Ty, where can you be found? Where can people go in and buy X, Y, Z? And I would notice that I would start to get sales. I would start to get other people reach out to me to be on their podcast. I would start to get more followers. There's this ripple effect. Is that pretty common? Do you see that?
Yeah. No, I think as an author, like in that scenario that you just mentioned, you actually have a lot of leverage, right? Because the first thing is, like, most people want to write a book, but they actually never write a book. And sorry about my video today. It's been like, my camera's been being a little wonky.
Yeah.
So
I think maybe your HD settings in Zoom. I had the same exact problem. We're doing our Get It Done challenge this week. And on Monday, I think it was, Caroline, where mine was going in and out, right? So, and I went in, I unchecked the HD settings, and
I'll have to check that. Thanks. Yeah. Appreciate that. And I didn't even mention Caroline, the glorious Caroline. I'm sorry, I didn't even say hello. Good to see you back. I didn't see you last week. I know you're traveling.
It was great to have a conversation with you this week as well, and back and forth, and we're messaging each other. But I always know someone is going to be, or has been, and is going to be incredible when they come back the following week. And
we've never had that before.
I don't think we have the following week, have we?
We haven't,
or
right?
even no. So that's a first, and also I know why, and I was very sad to miss last week. Although I got all the rundown of what happened from Ty. But yeah, it's great to see you and get connected with you.
You got it. So what I was saying, Ty, is that as an author, you actually have a distinct advantage because you have positioning. So if you, let's say, versus somebody who doesn't have a book, right? You're whether it's self-published or you're published by someone like Simon & Schuster, I believe is the company. You have leverage because now you're even more interesting, right? You have something to talk about. I know Caroline and you both were talking about, what do I talk about? Like I'm not interesting, I'm boring. And I would actually counter that and say, you're not as boring as you think you are, and anybody can be interesting if they tell a story or two, right? Because we're hardwired for stories. You've been through something in your life, I've been through something in my life, and that's the like through line that everybody can resonate with. So if you can tell a story, you can be interesting. Even a boring person can tell a story, right? Or with somebody who considers themselves boring. So I would say as an author, you have a distinct advantage because you are more valuable to, or perceived as being valuable because you have this book, right? So I would say that that's definitely something that authors should be leveraging, getting on other podcasts. And we could talk about like the process and stuff, but yeah.
Yeah, so stories. So let's kind of dive into that, because you could talk about why you wrote your book.
Yep.
Right. And if it's something that maybe it might be a book where there was something traumatizing that took place in your life, how you coped with it, right? You could talk about, how you got to that point. You could talk about the issue if you feel free enough. You could talk about maybe the journey, and meaning how long it took, because most people who write a book, they've thought about writing the book for years before they've even got to a point to start, right? So you could talk, absolutely, right? And I think that affects everyone. So stories are huge. And if you think about it, like last week on Monday, or was it Monday, this past Monday, Marvin came out. So he kind of quickly told a story about his journey with Kindle Publishing right now, and how he went in and he looked at one of our other students who was just like, right now, our recording just stopped. Not sure how that happened. Let me just go back to it. And he talked about how he looked at the results of one of our other students who was doing like $42,000 a month, and how that helped to reinstate his belief in the process, right? So even something like that, we might think that, well, look, I don't have enough of a story. Anything that's true and that you can just throw out there, there's someone that's going to be able to relate to it. Would you agree? Yes or no?
Yeah, totally. I think that's very powerful, and like like everybody's looking for inspiration. I mean, I don't really watch the news, but like there's so much like crazy chaos in the world today. So like if you even just say something that's like positive, right? Like, hey, I was walking down the road the other day and I saw a guy and he asked me to help him change his tire, and I pulled over and helped him change his tire or whatever, or I stopped and helped him change his tire. That's a cool story, right? It's like, man, there's like still good people in the world, right? And that's something that people can resonate with. So inspiration, sharing a win, shifting someone's belief, like this guy Marvin, like maybe he was kind of like, man, I don't know if I can do this anymore, but after hearing this story, he got re-engaged. So inspirational, aspirational, success, I think all those things are great.
That's so true. And Marvin's story, he just put a post in the group and it was incredibly powerful. So I shared it on here. So whatever, say 100 people, 80 people, whatever, heard that, and some people that would have resonated with. And then we used that story in the FastPass training, whenever we did it, Monday, a few days ago. And that because we came on to talk about how we're feeling in our business when we're working. Do we feel icky or do we feel good, and how can we shift it? And so that one post led to reaching out to, I don't know, say 100, and some of the people were the same people, but let's say 100 odd people plus. Yeah. And people really, really enjoyed that post because they really resonated with it. So it's very powerful. And he could have just not shared that. Yeah. It was just his own revelation that he had. And, but if you've got someone who was struggling that week, doubting themselves, that post would have helped them move the needle. So it's just his own story. But it's so powerful. And I think often we've got great things, we just don't share them.
We don't. Yeah, we're afraid.
And then all those people just don't listen and hear what we've got to say that could really help them, because it has a trickle effect, doesn't it, on so many people when we share good stories.
So Verna, is there a particular reason why stories work so well? Like, is there something that you found?
I think it's just I'm not like a story expert by the way, but I think like if I think through my experience, and that's the lens of how how I see the world. Like I grew up reading, and I don't know where people are located. I know there's people all around the world and stuff, but I know like when I grew up, there was like all these stories,
Right.
even down to like nursery rhymes. But there was like the little engine that could, what is it, like the three little bears, what is it, like Hansel and Gretel or like Goldilocks or some of the. So these are all stories that even as a kid in pre-K and early on, I was being read to, and it was laying the foundation for the importance of storytelling and kind of like encapsulating a theme or like a learning. So ever since I was a kid, I've been reading stories, and the best movies in Hollywood, there's this thing called The Hero's Journey. I don't know if anybody's. I actually have a copy here. I printed this out, but every movie script and every like major like blockbuster movie that you've seen, it follows this kind of like hero's journey, right? And if you're not familiar with the hero's journey, it's essentially like this. So, you take somebody like a Keanu Reeves, right? Like there's a call to adventure, like The Matrix. I think that's a good example, right? Yeah. He's kind of like living his life, and then he like realizes, wait, like something's wrong. There's this supernatural aid that comes, which is like the Oracle. The woman has a conversation with him, and she's like, hey, you're super gifted. You don't even realize how talented you are. And then Morpheus comes up, and then there's like this threshold where he's like the blue pill or the red pill, and he has a choice, right? And so I'm not going to go into too much detail there, but that's essentially the arc, the story. There's an arc, and then he basically figures out that he can like take on I forgot what whatever the bad guys are.
Right. We'll call them the suits, right? Because everyone.
The suits. Yeah. So I think, I personally think, and again, I don't know that like this is true for everybody, but like I know that the hero's journey is something, I think Joseph Campbell like wrote about that like years ago. So I know that that's a thing, but like for me personally, I think just like I'm hardwired for stories just because that's what I've known since I've been a kid.
Yeah. And if you think it just totally makes sense. If you think about it, right? Children will often say, if you guys who have children, right, young children, 5, 4 years old, 3 years old, can you read me a bedtime story? Right? So now we're used to hearing these bedtime stories. And as adults, we probably crave hearing stories. And that's where, our affinity for stories probably kind of continues on. So how does someone go about getting on the podcast? How does someone actually, because when I was doing it, and I'm thinking back here, there were 2 different approaches I was doing. I just didn't know, right, the right way of doing it. So I would just go out and ask people. That was the first way, right? Hey, can I be a guest on your podcast? And I would get no, yes, no, yes, right? The no sometimes would be non-replies. People would not reply. And then I actually hired an agency who specialized in getting guests on podcasts. So, but again, that was a long time ago. So what's the process like now? What do you recommend?
Yeah. So I actually have kind of like this kind of like process, if you will, right? Like my outreach, and I've done this before. Like everything I'm about to tell you, I've done. I'm not just like telling you to go do it, and I don't have experience in it, and it works. Yeah. So what I like to do is kind of think of like, what is my like intention? What is my outcome, right? Like, is it to build my audience? Is it to sell my book? Is it to build my influence and fame and credibility in my industry, right? So like that's step number 1, because you need to have a why. You need to know why you're doing it. And then the next piece is like coming up with like 50 to 100 shows. So you can do this by looking through Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can Google like top author podcasts. You can whatever, insert your industry. And I just kind of make a list of those, and I put them in a spreadsheet, or I write them down on a piece of paper. And then it's very important to and this is kind of like the tricky part. You kind of like got to suss out like which there's, I think the thing with podcasting on the audio side, not necessarily with YouTube, because with YouTube you could see the numbers, but with audio only podcasts, it's kind of like a black box. You don't know how many listeners or how big their audience is. So you kind of have to suss it out and kind of do a little, put on your Inspector Gadget hat and do a little like investigating and see and try to kind of like figure out like how big you think the audience is. And the best way that I've been able to do this, or to at least find some data, is to look at the reviews. So typically there's not always a correlation, but typically there's a correlation between the number of reviews and the size of the podcast. So if you take somebody like Tim Ferriss, the Tim Ferriss Show, you go look at his reviews. He has thousands. He probably has like 10,000 reviews. I don't know. Maybe that's, more, but like he has a significant amount of reviews, and that's reflected because he's one of the top podcasts. Maybe like not like Joe Rogan top, but like he's in the top, podcast. So if you have that, 50 to 100 shows, and then you start looking at the reviews, that's one way you can do it. When was the last time they published an episode? So like you said, Ty, like podcasting, a lot of people kind of like fizzle out because it's a lot of work on the back end. Mm-hmm. All the more reason why you should be a guest. But if you look and see, okay, have they published an episode in the last week or two, right? Maybe they go bi-weekly, maybe they go monthly, but there should be some kind of a cadence, right? So you look at the reviews, you looked at when's the last time they publish. The next thing you want to look at is like, do you think this is like interesting, right? Is there something here that you can kind of like pull out? Yeah. And you'll have to listen to at least, like one episode or part of it. I usually will do like 2x and kind of skim through. If you look in the description, a lot of podcasts have the timestamps, so you can kind of see, okay, like at that 27-minute mark, they're talking about the hero's journey. That's something that I'm interested in, and you can kind of like move the playhead to jump there. So that's actually important in step 3. And let me know if you want me to stop, because I'm on a roll.
No, this is good stuff. You guys, what do you think? Is this good or what? Do you want him to stop? Maybe we'll go back and we kind of elaborate on some of these, because I like listening.
Everyone's saying keep going, keep rolling.
Keep going. Okay.
Yeah. Because I know I can get on a roll sometimes, and I just I can go 100 miles an hour.
No, you're good to go. Yeah.
So where was I? Sorry. Where did I start?
Listen to the podcast, right? So going and listening to it. Check it out.
So when you listen to the podcast, that's really important, because you're going to use that in the next step, right? In step 3 that we're going to talk about. And you probably need to like see if it's a good quality, right? Like, is the audio trash? Like, does the host sound like they're kind of like they're not really giving the floor to the guest, right? Are they setting the guest up to to be a win for their audience? So these are all things that like most people wouldn't even think about, but I've been doing this for a decade now, so it's like, I just like, it's second nature, and I've done all of these things. And I think if you can get to that point, now you have like a core solid group of podcasts that you can now reach out to, which takes us to step 3. So step 3 is you're going to craft your outreach. Now there's no like right or wrong way. I would say maybe some things to like maybe keep in mind. You want to keep it short, and you want to mention as soon as possible something about the podcast that you liked or enjoyed, or that was relevant, or like, how it inspired you. And you also want to be authentic with this. Please don't like lie or like say, oh, I liked, episode 2. It was great. Don't be vague. Be as specific as possible. Be like, hey, I really loved when you interviewed Ty Cohen on your podcast. Just phenomenal guy. I loved how he talked about the hero's journey and how it made an impact, and how he shifted his writing, for the next 10 books he published, right? Like, that's something very specific that you can't just automate to a bot so they know that it's a real human. And you can't just like grab from like reading the show notes. You have to read the
transcript. It's unique to that episode, right?
Yeah,
like, damn, this guy actually listened to this episode, or listen to this episode, right? I love it. Okay.
And if you want to like, here's actually something that like I'm pretty sure that like 99% of people won't do. If you want to take it another step, podcasters love like reviews because it's like a way, it's like a testimonial for the podcast, right? So what I would also do is I would have my pitch, right? I would mention those things. I would leave a review on their podcast on iTunes, and then I would screenshot it. And then if it was an email, I could put it as an attachment, or there's like these services now where you can take a screenshot and it like uploads it and gives you a link. And I'd say, oh, by the way, I just left a glowing review for the podcast too. So that like people would always just like be tickled by that. Be like, wow, this guy's like on point. He listened to a podcast episode. He's quoting like, you know, one of his favorite parts. He left a review, and then I go in and I say, hey, like, not sure if you're looking for guests. You know, I just wrote this amazing book. I'd love to come on and, you know, just share it with your audience. I'm not here to pitch my stuff. I just want to give value. And I think that's an important thing too, because podcasters are getting hit up all the time, by the way. Like there's agencies like Ty just mentioned, and we'll talk about that. There's agencies that do this, that'll do this for you. And one of my clients, you know, like they get stuff all the time. Like they get pitches all the time, and most of them suck. Like I would venture to say that 99% of them don't have that. It's just like, hey, like here's so-and-so, he's really, really great, and he wants to come on your podcast. And it's like, well, no, clearly you're just trying to like leech off my audience to pitch your product, and you're not leading with any value. And some of them don't even know what the podcast is about. They haven't even taken the time to do the research. So please don't be like those people. And then the last step is just to follow up. You'll be surprised at like how many people say yes. You'll be surprised at how many people like they're just busy and like they forgot, or like, so you should follow up at least 6 times at minimum. And like, don't be like, and when I say follow up, I don't just mean like, hey, like, I didn't know if you saw my email, still looking to be on your podcast. You should keep adding value to the relationship. Hey, I saw this, maybe something interested to talk about on your podcast. Hey, it could be a news article. It could be something you saw in Forbes. Hey, did you, I checked out another episode and I really love this guy too. I'm fascinated. Why'd you invite him to be a guest, right? Like ask questions. And I can also guarantee you that a lot of people aren't following up. So that's the process. I know I've talked a lot.
This is great stuff, man. Keep talking. keep going, right? But look, a lot of this stuff that as you're talking about this, it just makes so much sense. There's so many of these things that I did not include, right, when I was going in and reaching out to podcasts. One of the things that stands out the most to me is, look, make it unique. Because so many people will go in and they'll write out a paragraph. And we see this like in the affiliate marketing thing, right? I'll have so many people that will reach out to me and it just sounds so redundant. Like there's no thought that's been put into it, right? So the same with this. Listen to the podcast, genuinely compliment, right? Use something like Lightshot so that you can screenshot the review that you've left and say, hey, listen, I just left you a review because I listened to this thing and I thought it was fantastic. You interviewed Coach Caroline on here, and she talked about, you know, how she took her 3 kids to Dubai and how she was able to do that with Kindle publishing and digital publishing, etc. Now that host truly knows that you listen, right? So I think that is absolutely fantastic. I think the other thing is, you know, checking out like the last time that they published a show. I think that's brilliant, because you can go in and reach out to these shows that haven't been active for a year or 2, and you're kind of wasting your time there, right? By doing
That's correct.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on some of this, Caroline? And guys in the chat box, let us know what questions, what follow-ups do you have?
I think all of that was so good. You know, was Vernon was going through all of that. You're like, why? Okay, I need to podcast. But the thing that really resonates so much with me is this whole story thing. Because if you think about it, when we started working together 2 years ago, it was March 21. That was the first time and this is why podcasts are so important. I know we didn't do one of those, but we did a video. But when we had that conversation, we didn't know each other, and look where that led.
Yeah.
A few weeks later, I came on the live event, and then I worked behind the scenes on the live event during that session, and it led to so many different things. And one of the reasons why it happened like that and was powerful is because I had a story. And when I was in network marketing before this business, it was all about the stories. So, how people encourage people to work with them in that space was by them sharing their stories. In that space, often there's a story of contrast, and you've got to be careful how you sort of manage that, because it's the story of things were bad and now they're good. We don't want to sort of always, but my because my story was a bit like that. There are so many women and men, but probably I don't know what the percentage is, but maybe a higher percentage of women that come to me and say, the reason why I'm not giving up, or the reason why I'm doing this particular business, publishing or whatever they're doing, is because you give me hope. Because if you can do it, I can do it. And that's all based on the story, which is a real story.
Yeah.
And so that everyone is going to have something like that they can share and deliver to the world. So it's just, when Vernon was talking about stories, I was thinking, gosh, that's the essence of everything, isn't it? Your story.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why you're so successful and people love you is because of your stories that you share, honest, authentic, and you're different to other people in that, which is why people gravitate to you. And it's because you're sharing a story of how life could have gone one way, but you decided to take it a completely different way. And there's, and those stories really help people believe in themselves, believe that they can do things when times are hard. And so the whole story thing is really powerful that Vernon was talking about. That's something that's really come out for me today.
And it could be literally anything. Oftentimes, the story that you think won't matter to someone really matters. Look, Vernon and I, you and I were talking week before last. This was after we had Suresh on.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in the car. I was driving down to the beach. And you were telling me about how you met your wife.
Yeah.
How you met your wife during the pandemic. And how you guys had this unconventional dating process, and how you were together on Zoom. And he was saying, and let me know if I'm giving away too much. Vernon.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
I thought it was cool. He was saying, like, because they couldn't get together physically because of COVID, they met during that period. They would get together on Zoom and they would dress up. Like, he would dress up and she would dress up. And look, guys, I hardly remember any damn thing. But I remember, like, the story that he was telling, and I'm driving at the same time he's listening to, and I just thought it was fascinating. So I don't know if you thought that, I don't know what you thought about the story, you yourself, right? But to me, it was just fascinating. So I'm sharing this to say that we all have these elements, these things in our lives that if we go out and we share it with other people, you're going to find enough people that are fascinated by your story. They're intrigued by it. They're motivated by it. They're inspired by it. They're energized by it. They're uplifted by it. And the most difficult thing to do is to repeat your story a gazillion times over. You know how many times I get tired of talking about sickle cell and having sickle cell anemia? But I know that when I talk about it, it inspires someone else. And there's probably no one else here who has sickle cell anemia, but you guys may have other things that you're going through. Right? So the Temptations, one of the greatest groups ever. They've probably sung the song My Girl 10,000 times. But they know that there's an audience, and their audience wants them to sing that song when they go in and they hit the stage. So this story part is a big part of it. And every single person that's here has a story, believe it or not.
They really do. Yeah, really do. About so many different topics. If we actually sort of took a topic, and it could be something like, a love topic or a business topic, everyone will have a story that's going to help somebody. And you just don't often realize the impact that you can have on people, and how then it sort of, someone hears a story and they might retell that story to somebody else, and it gives them hope. and it sort of goes through to the children and I think we just don't realize how we can influence people, even if we're not in famous positions. Everyone has the ability to do that. And so but I think it's so tempting sometimes not to keep telling the old story, because you just think, oh my gosh, they're just like, people are bored of hearing this. But in nearly every event that we ever do together, I will have numerous people that I then meet in sort of one-to-one sessions afterwards that say, oh, I didn't know that story about Ty, and I've experienced, and they'll talk, and then that helps motivate them to know that whatever they end up doing, there's hope that you really can push through different things in life that could get in the way. So there's always new people coming in, listening in. Someone's kid might listen into something, and then it has this ripple effect. But often we just don't think we're important enough to tell those stories. Yeah. And we all are. So yeah, very powerful.
Yeah.
This is great.
This is really fantastic. A lot of refreshers here and a lot of good stuff for me. Follow up. So the other thing that you said that I think is brilliant is the follow up of 6 to 7 times, right? So I think oftentimes we may not even realize that we need to follow up more than once or twice or 3 times. I think that if we do get past the once or twice, we kind of think that we're becoming a nuisance, right? Like, man, I don't want to reach out to this person 5 or 6 times. But we also forget that, look, I talked about it at the very beginning. I think it was Kat, we were talking about how she's reached out to me, and I'm like, I only remember when I see her here on MMM. And I'm like, oh my God, freak, I meant to go and respond back to Kat last night. I had it on my freaking success list and I didn't do it. So I think that oftentimes people, they don't not intentionally respond. I think that some people are just the non-responders. There's groups of people. There's the responders, there's the non-responders, there's the intending to respond, but they just don't get around to it, right? And then there's the people that are just not going to respond, whatever the hell you say. Yeah. Right? So it's like, but if you're following up these 6 or 7 times, then you're probably increasing the likelihood of getting that attention and getting that reply. And then if you're doing it in a unique way, this is what I think that you said that's brilliant about this is you're adding value each time. So each time it's different. And I'm thinking about, like, again, going back to the affiliate marketing game, when I would have people that would reach, and even now I still see this about 7 or 10 times a week, I get somebody who will reach out to me to promote one of their products. And it's very robotic. I can tell that they've copied and pasted this to 25 other people, which is even more of a turnoff, because I'm like, damn, dude, like you couldn't throw something in there, like say something about one of my kids, man. You're got
mention your name. Hi, Tom.
Right. Mention my name. Hey, you wouldn't want to promote this product, would you? Right. And that's it. Right. So the uniqueness in that. So I think that's very smart. Vernon, I feel like we've been talking forever now. Me and Caroline and I. So what else you got to throw in there?
No, I think just it's that simple, but it's also like it takes work. I'm not gonna pretend that this isn't something that you got to put some elbow grease and time in. But, like if you think about it, it's a lot harder to build an audience from scratch. So like if you think about how much time, I mean, Ty, you've been doing this for so long, and I think a lot of people aspire, myself included, I consider you a friend and mentor. Like if you look at like something that Ty's done, it's taken him years to build this, right? Look at all the amazing people that are on this call right now. I'm looking, there's 69 people here, right? And so like, imagine that you're getting on someone's podcast and they have thousands of listeners, right? Like that's instant credibility. That's the shortcut if there ever was one, right? And there's still work involved, but I just want to reiterate that it's not easy, but it's worthwhile because you're basically getting on stage, a virtual stage, in front of thousands of people who could potentially be your next customers.
Yeah.
So that's the value, and remember that. And the other piece is that you don't actually have to do all of this. If you have some money that you can put behind it, there are services out there. I don't use any of those services, so I can't endorse them and say, hey, like you should use this one. But if you just, type in Google like podcast booking services, there's plenty of them out there. I just I can't give you one or recommend you one personally because I haven't used them myself personally.
Got it. That's good stuff. Now, look, what about the person that is just a little bit intimidated? They're shy. They don't want to get on a podcast and they don't want to talk, because it could be kind of an experience if you're just not this outgoing person, right? How do we overcome that?
Yeah, I think like the confidence piece is what I'm hearing you say. Like, how do you build self-confidence?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like anything else that you do, right? I like to use the gym example because I think that's pretty universal. And like the first time you go in the gym, like you're not really, depending on your experience, I'm just going to assume that like you're not, a person that's like super active or like maybe you've had challenges with like your health or something. Like when you go in the gym, like it's immediately intimidating.
Wait, are you saying I don't go to the gym? Like, are you dissing me right now, man?
I'm not talking about you.
You see these biceps here?
You feel called out. No, but so when you go to the gym, right, for the first time, if you've never gone or you haven't gone in months, it's super intimidating. You got guys in the corner grunting and they're like, looking at themselves in the mirror. You got the beautiful women on the treadmill and right, like everybody looks all polished and perfect. And you're like, man, like this is not inspiring at all. Like I want to just like walk out and leave. Right. But if you find that if you go and you stay and you show up again and you show up again, and by the third or fourth week, you're like, I can actually do this. All of these people that are around me are like, yeah, they're, like, I'm not going to compare myself to those people because I don't know their story or how long they've been doing this. So the repetition is what builds confidence. But those first couple of times, like, you're going to bomb. It's not going to feel good, right? You're going to have like imposter syndrome. You're going to be like, who am I to be on? I've had all of that stuff, right? Like, that stuff has all been there. I think the difference is with the people who succeed is that they understand that like they just have to keep getting the reps, and over time that repetition will build confidence. And the other piece is that like if you're not confident in what you're saying, like just talk about yourself, because you're an expert in yourself. Like no one knows you better than you, maybe like your parents or your, but like you know you better than you. So just talk about yourself. That's the easiest I think way to eliminate some of that.
Yeah, I think that's smart. Talking about yourself, right? No one knows you better than you. I mean, maybe you got an ex-wife or ex-husband, or maybe your mom or your cousins or something that knows some stuff about you that they might want you to put on a podcast. Maybe ask them, look, maybe ask people in all seriousness, if I was to be on a podcast, what do you think I should talk about? Right? Like what would you like to hear me talk about? I think oftentimes we're so close to it that we don't even see the value that we offer. But if we go in and I say, hey, I asked my wife Melida, well, maybe my wife might be too close, right? Maybe your spouse might be too close. But if you ask a friend, maybe someone that you talk, like, what do you think I'm good at? And be honest, right? And they'll tell you. Do you think it's best for people to go on new shows that have, and initially, like new shows that have very few listeners so that they can kind of build up that nerve? And
cut your teeth on a smaller show. Mm-hmm. Build your chops on a smaller show, and then go pitch Tim Ferriss, right? Don't try to be on the Tim Ferriss show as your first show. I love the ambition and the gusto, but you have to start where you're at, and the repetition, right? Like, because what you'll find is that over time you'll get better. Like if you go back and listen to like one of my first interviews, it's atrocious, right? Like it's cringeworthy.
Yeah, I listened to one, man, and it was terrible. I was like, I'm just joking.
But if you listen to me now, right? Like I sound like, like I've been doing this for a while, but I because it's just the only difference between me and somebody else is just I've been doing it longer, right? That's the only. I'm not, it's not. I don't have superpowers. So yeah.
Let's do it. Hey, Vernon, this has been fantastic, man. Great questions, great answers, a great list. I have an entire list here on my desk that I wrote out here of stuff that I'm actually going to go in and start using this week. I know you're starting to travel tomorrow. Like you're heading out tomorrow. I actually felt bad because I put Vernon on the spot last week, and I'm like, you got to come back next week. And who wants him back? And then as we're texting, come to find out that he's going to be traveling tomorrow, and I'm like, oh my God. And then I realized that yesterday was the 4th of July, which made me feel even worse. But if people want to reach out to you, man, how can they reach out to you? Like, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
Email. You can just email me. Yeah. workwithvernon@gmail.com is my email.
Wow. Super simple too. Workwithvernon@gmail.com.
Yeah.
Let's see. Thank you, Cynthia. Cynthia, you're super fast. So Cynthia just.
Thanks, Cynthia. Just doing that. You beat me to it.
Lord George says, can I be on one of Vernon's podcasts? So he wants to be a guest on your podcast. Now he's putting you on the spot again.
We can talk about it, George. Tell me what you got for me. What kind of value you bringing?
There you go. All right. Listen, I always relate everything to dating, right? That sounds like one of the young ladies. Wait, long time ago before I got married. I asked her on a date, and she's like, you tell me what you got for me. What value you bring there? So
yeah. Did it get to the date time?
Right. There you go. All right. So, all right, guys, this is fantastic. Vernon, travel safe.
Thank you.
Vernon@gmail.com, guys. Make sure that you go into the Facebook group. Let Vernon know what your biggest takeaway from session 2. Like this is our second time of having him as a guest. So please go in. He was gracious enough to come in the day after a holiday and the day before he's actually going on holiday, as Caroline would say over in the UK, going on vacation there. So definitely let us know what your biggest takeaway was. And we continue the Get It Done Challenge today. So myself, Caroline, Willie, the whole gang, Coach Jawar is there, and a ton of other people. Make sure that you join us tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern. For the Get It Done Challenge. You can go in, you can register for free by going to tycohen.com/MOC. If someone could please be cool enough to put that into the comments, if you're watching on YouTube, or put it into the chat box. It's tycohen.com/MOC. You can join us on the Get It Done Challenge. We have a couple of more days that we'll be running this challenge over the next week. And what we're teaching you how to have your own digital product created for less than $25. So how you can go in and yes, actually, Cynthia, they can go in and they can register for free. If they want to upgrade to like a platinum or VIP ticket or a general admission ticket, they could do that. But yeah, they can actually go in and register for free. So tycohen.com/MOC will teach you how to have your own digital product created in less than like 24 hours for like less than $25. So super beneficial. Coach Caroline is there. Like I said, Willie is there, myself, I'm there, Coach Jawar is there. And we're just having a good time. We had a great time yesterday. We'll continue today. We'll continue tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And that's it. Right? Caroline, anything that you want to add to this?
Just thank you to everyone that's put the links in for that. And just to say a massive thank you to Vernon, who's just incredible. Where are you traveling? Where are you traveling to?
I'm going to Mexico for a retreat.
No, oh, nice.
Okay. Yeah. Is this business or pleasure?
It's like a men's retreat, so I guess it's kind of both.
Very cool. I didn't get the invite, man, but
Dennis Crosby. I don't know if you know Dennis.
Dennis and I talk all the time. Shit, he actually did invite me.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, he's invited me to like the last 3 things. I've been so bad at just not. Yeah. So tell him I said hello.
Will do.
Yeah.
Dennis, and thank you. And thank you for having me. This is great. I hope you guys got a lot of value out of this. And, don't just sit with this information. It would be a disservice to Ty, Caroline, myself, all of you, if you guys do nothing with this information. So please just go put it into action and get on a podcast in the next week or so and come tell me about the results.
Closing out like a true podcast professional.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Vernon.
Perfect.
Well, guys, go into Facebook right now and post your biggest takeaway. And then secondly, go in and register for the Get It Done Challenge, tycohen.com/MOC. We'll see you next week. Stay well, guys. Bye-bye. Also, remember, I won't be here on next Monday's call, but then after that, I'll be for about a week and a half. So
next Monday.
Yes, I will be on next Monday's call.
You will be, yeah. Then the next 2 Wednesdays, you're not. We've got that. I've got that already covered. Yeah.
There you go. All right, guys. Who wants to be a guest? Maybe Caroline will have one of you guys